Bo Parfet is part of an elite group. He's climbed the 7 summits, the highest peaks on each of the 7 continents. It's an incredibly difficult challenge, with most men not even daring to try. When we spoke about his experience, he mentioned that 80% of the mountaineering accidents happen on the way down. After the summit, when the danger feels over, right? He explained that most climbers get into trouble the moment they start believing the peak is the finish line. They relax, they lose focus. They assume the risk has passed. And that's when the missteps happen. While most of us will never climb mountains someday, and certainly not 7 of them, we see this risk in real life as well. We work hard, to build the life we've always dreamed of, the degree, the career, the house, the marriage, the kids. And then somewhere along the way, we get complacent. We start coasting. We start to act like we've made it. And so we stop trying so hard. And it's in those very moments when you feel, steady, successful, or confident that subtle dangers creep in. Pride, complacency, isolation, right? Neglect of what matters most. Small compromises that grow into big consequences. We see this in the news all the time. High profile men, leaders, pastors, CEOs, public figures who seemed, to have everything going for them, only to throw it all away. Not because they were weaker than you, not because they were reckless, not because they meant to, but because they let their guard down after the climb. When we look at scripture, we see this pattern clearly, not just in mountaineering, not just in leadership scandals, but in the human heart itself. Proverbs 16:18 warns us, pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. That verse isn't aimed at other men. It's written for you and me, right? For all of us. Because pride doesn't show up when life is hard. It shows up when things feel stable. And the fall, scripture warns, about isn't always a headline level collapse. Sometimes it's a slow drift in your marriage. Sometimes it's the distance growing between you and your kids. Sometimes it's waking up one day, realizing, your spiritual fire quietly went out while everything on the outside looked fine. Paul reinforces this in 1 Corinthians 10:12. Therefore, let anyone who thinks that he stands take heed lest he fall. It's not meant to scare you. It's meant to protect you. It reminds us that no one is beyond temptation and no one is automatically safe just because, life is going well. The truth is simple. Any man can stumble, when he stops paying attention. And any man can stay faithful when he stays humble and alert. If you've ever climbed toward a major goal, professionally, spiritually, or personally, you know how much focus it requires. But once you reach that milestone, something unexpected happens. The pressure eases, the urgency fades, and you start to believe, you can relax. And that's exactly why this matters. Because the danger you experience after you reach the top isn't that you suddenly become irresponsible. It's that you slowly stop being intentional. And that's how good men drift. A man can love his wife deeply and still lose connection with her, if he assumes the relationship will run on autopilot. A man can adore his kids and still wake up, years later realizing he missed that small window where, their hearts were open. A man can be on fire spiritually and still grow cold if he assumes yesterday's faith will carry him into tomorrow. And the enemy would love nothing more than to convince you that, you're safe now, right? Your guard can drop. Your habits don't matter anymore, that you've earned the right to coast. But coasting is what erodes a man's character. It's what blinds him into just subtle promises that eventually take him out. If you want to finish well, not just start well, then what you do after you reach a certain level of success matters just as much as what you did to get there in the first place. So, how can we walk with wisdom in every season? Let me give you some practical steps that will keep you grounded. Number one, strengthen the foundations that got you here. When a man reaches a level of success, maybe it's financially, professionally, or relationally, he often loosens the very habits that made him strong. Maybe life is busier now. Maybe travel increased. Maybe the pressure to perform is greater. But success, doesn't remove the need for discipline. It increases it. This is where, you double down on basics. A constant rhythm of scripture and daily prayer, a weekly Sabbath of rest, and real accountability for men who know you, right? Clear boundaries around work, technology, and travel. These aren't early stage habits. These are lifelong survival skills. And if you didn't build strong foundations on the way up, establish them now, right? They will protect you when everything around you says, you're fine. You don't need this anymore. You do need it. Number two, stay connected to people who tell you the truth. Success often isolates a man, sometimes unintentionally, sometimes subtly. People assume you don't need help. They assume your world is running smoothly. And before long, you realize no one, in your life is speaking honestly to you anymore. You need truth tellers, men who aren't impressed by you, intimidated by you, or dependent on you. Men who will ask the hard questions. How's your marriage? Really? What's pulling at your heart right now? What temptations, feel loudest? Are you running too fast? Number three, keep pursuing a mission bigger than you. Bo talked, often about his why and how remembering it gave him strength, when the mountain was dangerous. You need a why too, a God-given mission that keeps your heart awake and, your life pointed in the right direction. Because when a man stops living with purpose, he starts, living for comfort. And comfort is where compromise grows. Your mission, your God-given calling as a husband, father, leader is what keeps you from drifting. It reminds you that your decisions today ripple out into your family, your legacy, and your generations that come after you. When your why is big enough, you fight harder to stay faithful. If you're in a season where life feels steady, where things are working, where you've reached a goal, where the pressure has lifted, this is not your time to relax spiritually. It's your time to stand guard, because the man who finishes well isn't the man who never stumbles. It's the man who refuses to get comfortable. So here's the challenge. Choose one area today where you've let your guard down spiritually, relationally, or personally, and tighten it back up. Rebuild a habit. Reopen a conversation. Reconnect with someone who tells you the truth. Recommit, to the mission God has given you. You've worked too hard to get here. Don't lose what matters most now. Will you subscribe to the Courageous Men podcast so you never miss an episode? Will you share this with a friend who's, in a good season, but maybe closer to danger than he realizes? A man who, needs the reminder to stay alert, stay humble, and stay faithful on the descent. Start by joining the Courageous Men community. Let's take action. Let's be courageous.